right, here with Mike Barron to share more about writing or his thoughts.
Greetings, my friends. A lot of young people who are interested in entering the comics field approach me for advice, and I always have lots of advice. I don't know about the future of comics. Comics appear to be in free fall, but they'll always be with us like the horse. When the automobile was first invented, people predicted that the horse would be extinct within 20 years. Well, that didn't happen because people love horses, and people love comics. So regardless of the status of the big two, comics will always be with us. Well, how do you create a compelling comic? Last week I attended a convention in Pikeville, Kentucky, with my old friend Rags Morales, with whom I worked on Turok Dinosaur Hunter. Rags is an awesome artist, and he also taught at the Kubert School. And Rags shared with me his rules for people who want to be comic book illustrators. His first rule is, you're the director. If you don't like what the writer has done, throw him off the set. Rags and I nearly got in a fist fight over that, but nevertheless, he's right, that the illustrator is the director in the sense that the illustrator decides pacing and what to show. His second rule was, if you have a question, ask the writer. Well, that's very good advice. The writer should be able to answer any question you have. His third rule is, all pairings are opposite. I'm not sure what he meant by that, but I think that he was referring to panel layout as well as writing itself, because he said that when you have a team-up effort, you have a buddy comedy, you have one guy who's a wisecracker and another guy who's always serious. Or when you have a female buddy comedy, you have one woman who's always on the make and the other one who's always reticent and says, don't do that. He's referring to character team-ups in the sense that if you have two characters who are very similar in personality, that's not going to work as two characters who bounce and ricochet off each other. And I know this for a fact because I just watched The Highwaymen with Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson about the two Texas Rangers who ended Bonnie and Clyde's career. And it was absolutely true. Costner was the super responsible guy, didn't drink, dead-eye with a gun. And Woody Harrelson was a recovering alcoholic who was always screwing up to a certain extent, and it worked very well. So that's what he meant about all pairings are opposite. His fourth rule is, art is the creation of something from nothing that is true about the human condition, which is a brilliant insight. Art has to appeal to us. It has to satisfy our sense of what is right and what is wrong. There are exceptions to this. There are books about vile characters that are fascinating to read, such as Paris Trout by Pete Dexter, and the Flashman series by George MacDonald Fraser. But generally, the reader wants somebody with whom he can identify and for whom he can root. And we want to see a moral balance at the end. We want to see evil punished. Now, there are many great books where the good guy dies at the end, but he also accomplishes his goal. And there's a book called On Moral Fiction by John Gardner, which I recommend as well, which explains this in greater detail. His fifth rule is, if it starts negative, it must end negative. If it starts happy, it must end happy. And Rags explained this, saying if the story if it begins with the protagonist in despair and disarray, he can achieve some happiness in the middle, but at the end you have to leave him in despair and disarray. Whereas if it starts with a happy protagonist with whom everything is going right, he can reach despair and disarray in the middle of the narrative, but by the end he has to be restored to his happiness. Now, these are Rags' rules, not mine. I don't know how true that is, but it's worth passing on because Rags knows what he's talking about. And his final rule, and this is for illustrators, is every time you add information to a panel, take one step back. And he's referring to your camera. You set the table, it's got 2 plates and 2 people sitting there. But if you add a third person, you've got to pull that camera back to show more of what's going on in the panel. And this dovetails with my rule for comic book illustrators in that every page must have an establishing shot. An establishing shot is a visual that shows every character involved on that page in one setting and their physical relationship to one another. After that, you can go into your close-ups. But every page must have an establishing shot. That's all I got for now.
Do you have any tips for your audience?
Never spit in a man's face unless his beard is on fire.
All right, thanks. So we're going to be doing more of these YouTube videos on a more frequent basis. So stay tuned, and thank you so much for listening. All right, bye.